Podcasting is kind of fun, to be honest with you. I say it's fun is because, like, from a typical standpoint, typically when someone launches a podcast, it's just an audio podcast. One of the things that I have loved about having a podcast all these years is that people, they just get to listen to my voice and I don't have to like show up on video. So if I look completely homeless, like I just got out of a trash can with the Cookie Monster, you guys would not know about the sound of my voice. Things are different now because now we have a video podcast on YouTube. But when I think about if you should start a podcast, I would say absolutely. Welcome back to another episode of the Keenya Kelly podcast. And today we are talking about podcasting of all things. Should you start a podcast? And so, as you know, inside of my intro, I said, yeah, you should start a podcast. I have a couple of reasons why I feel like that you should. But first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for listening and watching my podcast, because there's so many people that you could listen to. And every single time somebody sends me a message that said, Keenya, I like your podcast. I listen to your podcast. Your podcast is whatever. I don't know. It just does something to me. It's like, I like when people like my TikTok videos or my courses or like a live class or something like that, or me speaking. But there's something about someone who listens to my podcast, because it's like something that I didn't feel confident in doing when I started it. I used to hate the sound of my voice. I felt like I sounded like Kermit the Frog, and all people technically have is my voice. And so when a person chooses to play me, does that make sense? When they're playing me in their car, at the gym or whatever, it's like, it's really humbling. It's also very life-giving, because I remember when I didn't believe in myself, when I didn't know what I was doing with podcasting, I almost gave up because I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm so grateful. I say that with you because I'm just thankful for you listening and watching now. But as it pertains to you starting a podcast, yeah, I think that you should. But it also depends on where you are in your business and your ability to be consistent, because that's important. But a couple things. One, when I think about podcasts, it's an opportunity to just get out whatever you're thinking. Now, you don't want to just have a podcast where you're just talking about anything. You want to have a genre. You want to have, this is who you are. This is what people can expect when they come to your podcast. And so, but like once you choose whatever that is, now you get an opportunity to talk about however you see things. Like people are listening to you uninterrupted, right? So I think about some of the podcasts that I'm aware of. I know that there's two people on Netflix's podcast called We Have the Receipts, and they are people that review Netflix shows and like reality shows and just Netflix things or whatever. One of them is Lauren Speed Hamilton. She was on the episode of Love is Blind, season 1. And I just think about like them on their podcast. Like, it's not a podcast that I enjoy listening to per se, but it's like she always wanted to be a podcaster. And now she has this huge opportunity to, watch reality TV if she really enjoys that and talk about it. And so when I think about me, I love business. I love marketing. I love empowering people, encouraging people. Every single week, I get to have a topic where I can do all of them. I can talk about me, how I think, how I do what I do. I can talk about things I've gone through, things I'm learning or going through or whatever, as it pertains to like, business and things of that nature. I just get to talk, you know what I mean? But from a business standpoint, it's an opportunity to reach a whole different group of people and in a different way. If you're on social media, then you're scrolling and you're constantly seeing a lot of different people's messages. But when someone is dialed into your podcast, they're not listening to multiple people at the same time. They're listening to one person. They're listening to you and your message. They can either fall in love with you or decide that they're not interested with you. But those that do are like, they can subscribe to you. And so it's like every time you have a new episode, it tells them you have a new episode, and they can listen as they work out. They can listen as they do the dishes, as they clean. Their kids can listen to you as they drive them to school. And so you have this opportunity to empower or encourage or uplift or teach or whatever it is you do to a person and potentially to a group of people in a car. You know what I'm saying? And I know people like Amy Porterfield who have built multi 8-figure business from podcasting. Now we know her, she does video marketing now, but for the longest time, it was just her and her podcast. A person can like just all you need is a mic. Like right now, I'm recording this podcast episode on Zoom, right? Because I'm doing a video marketing podcast too. I just have my mic and it's plugged into my computer and it's through Zoom, Now, when I first got started on podcasting, I used a software called Audacity because somebody taught me how to use it. And then my Mac and Audacity were no longer compatible. So I had to learn via YouTube how to use the app GarageBand that was already on my Mac. That was so hard to figure out how to use it. But once I figured it out, I got it. And so I didn't have to buy a new piece of software because it was already on my computer. I wasn't very good at it. Now we have a podcast producer, but for the longest time, for years, it was just me putting the intro in and the outro and then, the episode or whatever, and then uploading it to Libsyn, which is what I used to use. We use Buzzsprout now. If you're interested in Buzzsprout, we have a link in the show notes that you can subscribe to Buzzsprout, but it was just me. And so like we had thousands and thousands and thousands of downloads where the production quality wasn't the greatest because it was just me. I had a ATR 2100 mic. I still have that same mic. I mean, it's a new one because it was the old one, went out, but like this has been my mic, the same type of mic forever, the ATR 2100, then the software that we use. And that was it. And so I do think that if you're thinking about launching a podcast, that you should. It is really important to understand this, that you're going to have to promote your podcast. You're going to tell people on your email list, on social media. You're going to have to tell people everywhere that you have a podcast. You can't just expect that everybody's going to find your podcast just because you launched it. Everything that we do, it has to be promoted. Okay. There has to be some intention behind getting people to find that that you just discover you and to listen to you. Okay. And you're going to have to do that each week if you want people to listen. But also you're going to need to be consistent. You're going to need to be consistent with your podcast. I have had people who I like fell for their podcast and then it just fell off. And it's just like, you don't really like it when people fall off. Now, I had a time when I fell off, especially when my grandma passed. I was just like, I just went dark. But everybody on social media knew and my email list knew, hey, my grandma just died. Nope. I'm focusing on me, you know what I mean? But then I picked back up, I have a ministry podcast, which is called the You, Me, and Jesus podcast. And I've had some times with that where I fell off and I'll tell my audience, hey, I'm really sorry for that. And I had to go, okay, Keenya, like you can't expect loyal listeners when you're not even loyal yourself to the podcast. Ouch. And so if you are going to launch this podcast, my encouragement to you is to learn about podcasting. Okay. It's to learn about, some of the skills of creating podcasts and, editing if you're not going to hire somebody to produce it for you, but also learning ways to talk to your audience when you're there, because the last thing they want is like, you're bouncing around from this and this, and you're just going here and there and all these different topics. But like learning how to like be there with a person, like talking about your topic, giving them what it is that they need and kind of keeping it short and sweet. Like my podcast episodes are normally like 10 to 12 minutes. Cause I'm like, sometimes if I'm interviewing somebody, then it's a little longer, but for the most part, I'm like, I want you to be able to get in and get out with my podcast. I want you to listen and learn, get inspired, get equipped or what have you, and then move on to whatever your next task is or listen to another one of my episodes. And so that's why mine is so short. But if you're going to do this, then you just decide what is your rhythm. So whether you are podcasting once a week or a couple times a week, whatever your length is going to be, determine what that's going to be about, determine what it is that your podcast is going to like focus on. Mine is called the Keenya Kelly Podcast. So it's all things Keenya Kelly, but for the most part, it's around business and marketing, and then start showing up. I remember one of the first tips somebody gave me when I launched my podcast was put out your first 5 episodes. They said, record 5. And then when you launch it, put 5 out at one time. And I was like, I had never heard that, but I was like, I'm gonna do it. And so I did. We had a lot of people download it. I can't say a lot, but it was like a nice amount of people. Like to me, it was like 30 was great. Download it and listen to all 5 episodes. And they enjoyed it. And they wrote reviews on iTunes, which was awesome. It just really helped me, as it pertains to like getting confident that people actually wanted to listen to what it was that I had to say. But I would encourage you to, if you can, purchase some kind of podcast course. Pat Flynn has a course. It's called Power Up Podcasting. He's a great person to learn about podcasting from. Okay, so find him, find his website. His brand is called smartpassiveincome.com. You can let him know that I sent you to get the Power Up Podcasting course. I recommend you do something like that. That way if you are going to launch it, then you're launching it with tools, you're launching it with strategy, and not just like throwing spaghetti on the wall and hoping that it sticks, but you actually have a plan and this is how we're going to do what we're going to do. And that's what I would say. If you are thinking about launching a podcast in 2023, I encourage you to do it. I think you should get yourself a mic, learn how to master your own podcast on your computer, or hire somebody. You can find somebody on Upwork. You can find somebody who can do the basics for you if you don't want to do it yourself, and get going. If you do choose to start a podcast, I do want you to send me a DM on Instagram at Keenya Kelly and say, I listened to the episode about podcasting. I'm launching it. My show is going to be called, but also send me a link to your first episode. I want to hear it. Like once you have it launched, give me that first episode in my DM on Instagram and I'm going to come and listen to it. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. And on YouTube, thanks for watching. To listen to the Keenya Kelly podcast, just visit any podcast player out there, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. We are everywhere.